Hey there, deep divers. It's Julie B, and today I'm diving into part one of my breakdown of the electrifying masterpiece that was the penultimate episode of the entire *Handmaid's Tale series, titled Execution. I'm going to focus on the shocking end of Nick Blaine first. Before I break down all the thrilling moments from this monumental episode, I need to get this out of the way. Partly because of the way they handled the Nick storyline, I can honestly say now that no matter how this series ends in the grand finale, it's already a mission accomplished for me. They landed that plane. Well, not that plane that we saw blown to smithereens in the sky. I mean the metaphorical, well, too soon? Look, I understand that a lot of the Handmaid fan base is in mourning right now over the loss of Nick Blaine. Look, I understand that, okay? And I empathize with you guys. But I'm going to break down why this needed to happen and what it says about the true message of this incredible series, what this series has always been about from the beginning. It was impossible to ignore the romantic portrayal of Nick and June's doomed forbidden romance. But we must remember, this is not a love story. I know we all love a great forbidden romance storyline. It's thrilling, it's engaging, it pulls you in. But they just never were going to be the end game here. This is not a Shakespearean star-crossed romance either. Yes, they were star-crossed lovers, but that wasn't at the heart of this story. This story is, and has always been, a harrowing tale about a dystopian society systematically enslaving and violating women, told through the skewed perspective of the deeply traumatized June Osborne. From the start of the series to the end, June has had to find the courage to rise up and not only free herself and fight for her children, but to launch an entire revolution against her oppressors. And unfortunately, Nick has always been playing for the oppressor's team. She just couldn't see it, blinded by her trauma. But in the end, as I predicted in my last deep dive on episode 8, after June's eyes were opened about Nick, she had to summon the strength to take him down along with all the other commanders because he chose the wrong side in this fight. Time and again, Nick chose fascism. He chose cowardice. He chose selfishness. He could have chosen June. He could have chosen justice. I know he was in a tough spot, but he always had a choice. In his final scene, Nick even admitted to Lawrence that June tried to convince him to leave all of this, to give up Gilead, thus acknowledging that he did have a choice, that he knew he could have taken a different path. And Lawrence knows that too, as he correctly responds, "You should have listened to her." These words carry so much weight. Indeed, Nick should have listened to June, and he sealed his own fate by not listening to her. As an eye and later a commander, he wielded much more power than the average person, and he had opportunities to leave all of this behind, even before he had the complication of a pregnant wife, which admittedly made things much more difficult for him, and he was between a rock and a hard place at that point. I get that. But even before she came into the picture, Nick had chances to leave, but he dug in his heels and stayed put. In my first deep dive covering episodes 1 through 3 of season 6, I expressed my frustration with the way Nick and June's relationship has been romanticized by this series. Because I can understand June falling for someone who is unworthy of her love, since Nick was her hero amid this hellscape. I just didn't understand why the show was romanticizing Nick and June's scenes through gorgeous lighting, dramatic cinematography, heart-wrenching writing, things like that. These are distractions that undermine the powerful feminist message of the series, that women are so much more than objects of men's affections and vessels to carry children. The feminist icon at the center of the series falling in love with a man who's complicit in this fascist regime didn't sit well with me, but I understood it because of June's trauma. It was the way the show itself portrayed this storyline that troubled me the most, giving it the classic Hollywood treatment and leading fans to focus more on this than on June's fight against Gilead at times. But I said that in that first deep dive, I said I have faith that this series can still turn this around, that June's eyes could open to Nick's unworthiness this season. When June's mother called her out on being in love with a fascist, that gave me hope. And it turns out I was right to be hopeful, because June's eyes finally opened to this reality later in the season. And this show did what I was calling on it to do in that first video I put out. This show turned it around and put the focus back on what it's really all about. Not a star-crossed romance, but the fight against a dystopian nightmare for all of these women. I now believe this was the end game all along, actually. That the show pulled us in with the gorgeous, dramatic Nick and June scenes for years because it wanted to teach us a hard lesson in real time with June. This entire story has been told through her skewed perspective, the handmaid's tale. All of us have a skewed perspective. Our perspectives, the way that we view life, we're all skewed by our own biases, our prejudices, our personal life experiences, our traumas. All of us. That's just being human. And June, specifically, we've been looking through her perspective, skewed by the trauma of living in this horrific place, and looking at Nick as her savior because he was there for her to comfort her. He was her hero multiple times. So the show dialed up the romance through lighting, music, etc. in these scenes because we were experiencing them through that skewed lens of June's perspective as a traumatized woman in love, clinging onto this man who was her hero over and over again. And then, in real time with June, after years of this, viewers' eyes were opened about Nick when he betrayed her and gave up Mayday's mission plan to Wharton this season. It's all part of the journey we've been taking with June from day one, seeing the story through her eyes. Now, Nick was not irredeemable. I pointed out also in my first video on this season that either June needs to open her eyes and walk away from Nick, or Nick needs to step up and finally do something on behalf of someone other than this one woman he happens to love. He's only ever stuck his neck out for her, or to do favors for her, never for all of the other enslaved women of Gilead. Sadly, Nick let us down in the end and failed to rise to the occasion, so June had to let him die, and the show literally blew up this star-crossed Hollywood romance right in front of our eyes. It needed to go, so in the finale of the series we can now put our full focus on what really matters. The revolution against Gilead, finally, at long last, oppressed women and allies of those women rising up to fight for their freedom. In my episode 8 deep dive, I pointed out that Nick might wind up being one of the earliest casualties in the revolution, that Nick may be forced to take Nick down along with the other commanders, and how hard that would be, because even though he betrayed her, feelings aren't logical, and you can't just turn them off like a light switch. Well, it's actually happened. In the very next episode, June has faced the ultimate test of her Achilles heel, her love for Nick. It takes an immense amount of strength for June to let Nick go and watch him die right in front of her, but he's left her no other choice. Earlier in the episode, Nick's wife Rose has a scare with her pregnancy, having to go to the hospital when it's too early for the baby to be born. At the hospital on the morning after the Handmaid's Rebellion, Rose wakes up and is surprised and pleased to see Nick by her side. Nick seems to feel a duty to be there, even though he clearly doesn't love Rose. Having a baby on the way has become his top priority now, which is totally understandable. What's not understandable or justifiable is what he does next, at Rose's behest. Rose tells him that June had been responsible for the plan to drug Serena's wedding cake, and the doctor thinks the drugged cake could have caused her medical emergency with the pregnancy. And look, I understand that this is a serious thing and he might be upset about this. I mean, he's justifiably upset about this, if this is truly the case that it could have put his baby in jeopardy. Rose's baby is fine now, though, and I think she's just using this to goad Nick into taking a stand for Gilead once and for all. Nick has been on the fence all this time, too indecisive to just pick a lane and stick with it, wanting to have his cake and eat it too. The truth is, Nick wanted to keep June safe because he loves her, but he also wanted to hold on to his position in Gilead. He once told June that before Gilead, he was a nobody and she wouldn't have even noticed him. Nick lost his mother young, and Gilead gave him purpose when he was directionless, made him feel like he matters. But this is Nick's moment of truth. Rose tells him he needs to stand up for Gilead, her, and their unborn child, that he needs to end June. So what's he going to do about it? I know he's between a rock and a hard place, and I understand that. I can see him struggling internally with the idea of ending June, but a look comes over his face that seems to say, okay, I've made up my mind. I'm choosing Gilead and choosing the side of ending June. Whether or not he would have actually backed efforts specifically to end June, well, we'll never know now. And I suspect that he wouldn't have been leading the charge to actually end June himself. I mean, he's justifiably upset that June may have caused complications to his wife's pregnancy through her scheme to poison the wedding cake. I understand that. He has reason to be upset about that. To be honest, again, he's between a rock and a hard place right now, and honestly, where he really screwed up was long before this, before he had a pregnant wife, before that complication. That's when he should have chosen June. That's when he should have stepped up. But regardless, this is where he's at now. And he definitely chooses Gilead in this moment because he shows up to join the extremist Warhawk commanders on their flight to DC. Now let's be clear. Nick did not need to do this. He had the perfect excuse to avoid it, with Rose still in the hospital after her pregnancy scare. No one forced him to come or even asked him to come. But in a dramatic twist, as June looks on in horror from her hiding spot behind Lawrence's car, Nick shows up just in time to catch the flight, on a plane with a bomb waiting for him. When he arrives, Lawrence is already on the plane with the bomb and the extremist Warhawk commanders, while June hides behind Lawrence's car after going along with him to help give him the courage to deliver the bomb. But the other commanders had arrived early, so Lawrence made the heroic decision to get on the plane with the bomb and stay there, too late to just secretly drop it off and leave. In this heart-wrenching last moment before he gets on the plane, Lawrence looks back at June with his hand over his heart, and once again, no words are necessary here. His face says it all. It's as if to say, "This is for you, June. Godspeed on your mission." I'll get into more on this storyline in my next video, but for now, let's focus on Nick. As Nick walks up to the plane entrance, he stops and hesitates, appearing to be deep in thought. The scene is electric with tension as June looks on, and as usual, no words are necessary. Elizabeth Moss's face emotes everything she's feeling, her horror upon seeing Nick and her desperate longing to warn him. And as viewers, we're on the edge of our seats, wondering, would June's love overwhelm her reason and cause her to blow her cover, effectively ending her life just to warn Nick? And would Nick turn and spot her hiding spot so close by? The way he hesitates right at the entrance to the plane, at the same spot where Lawrence had been able to look over and see June, it makes you wonder if he heard a noise coming from her direction and is about to look over and spot her. And knowing how much he's loved June, you can't help but wonder if he somehow senses her presence there. Not to sound cheesy, but their connection ran so deep for years. But I think he was just hesitating because he still loves June in his heart, not Rose. And he's well aware of the gravity of what this means. if he willingly chooses to go with the Warhawks now and crushes June's efforts with the May Day Rebellion and the revolution underway. But ultimately, Nick gets on the plane and June looks like someone has just pummeled her in the gut and knocked the wind out of her. Again, her face emotes pure, visceral pain that she must suffer in silence, as she's still not safe until that plane takes off. June is only human, and she suffered so much, enslaved by Gilead. Nick saved her several times and comforted her when she had no other source of love or comfort in that hellscape. So of course she clung on to him for dear life, literally, whenever she could, whenever they could steal a few moments together. Nick is also the father of her beloved daughter Holly. Having a child with him naturally deepened their bond, even though they couldn't raise her together, obviously. So despite his recent betrayal, of course June is still devastated to have to witness Nick's death. Her eyes have been opened to his cowardice and his selfishness, to the fact that he's complicit in this fascist regime, but she hasn't had time or space to process all of this and move on, to let go of her love for him. When Nick gets on the plane, he's warmly greeted by the other commanders who didn't expect him to be there. You see, he wasn't required to come or even invited. His father-in-law, Wharton, proudly tells the others that Nick and his grandson are the future of Gilead. And this is saying a mouthful to us as viewers. If Nick had lived, I believe he and his son really would have been the future of Gilead, continuing down this path toward propping up the fascist regime. After losing June's love, Nick had given up even doing smaller things to help others, reneging on his promise to Rita to eventually get her family out of Gilead within a couple of years. He fully gave in to the darkness, to cynicism, to a victim mentality. And Rita had asked him, "Don't you want to be a man who does the right thing?" But he responded, "I don't get to have what I want." This is just a cop-out and a victim mentality. Plenty of people have risen up against Gilead, people with much less power and privilege than him. Even Rita herself rises up and joins the revolution in this season after Nick betrayed her too. June rose up and performed many courageous and rebellious acts against Gilead, even when she was still a prisoner there. Nick could have done the same, but he made his choice. He even walks up to Lawrence on the plane and smugly says, "So you decided to join the winners?" This line indicates that Nick has stopped riding the fence, and he's firmly on the side of Gilead now, the side he sees as the winners. The toxic influence of this extremist commander boys club here is becoming apparent in Nick. Lawrence replies that, "You know how it is, you do what you have to do to survive." An ironic line coming from Lawrence, because right now he's doing the exact opposite for once in his life. He's giving up his life for the cause of justice, of revolution. Now, despite the fact that he's chosen Gilead, Nick can't help caring for June. He asks Lawrence, "Is she all right?" He's no longer doing anything to make sure June is all right, but he's still holding on to his feelings for her. Would he have still tried to keep playing both sides and protect June while still protecting himself and his position in Gilead? I doubt it. June was almost hung that day, for God's sake. Another monumental scene that I'll get into in my next deep dive. And instead of doing anything to try to help her or check on her, Nick chose to get on the Warhawk plane, which no one even asked him to do. And this is where he tips his hand and tells Lawrence that June tried to convince him to leave all of this behind many times. So he's coming right out and admitting that he knows he had a choice, but he couldn't let go of Gilead. And again, Lawrence is right when he says, "You should have listened to her." And so the plane takes off and explodes in the sky, while June looks on in shock and devastation. Lawrence goes out a hero, fully aware that he's sacrificing his life for the revolution, while Nick goes out a coward, left in the dark about June's latest mission with Mayday that's about to end him, all because he broke her trust. It didn't have to end this way for Nick, and it's a shame. He had potential to become a better man, to redeem himself in the end, like even Lawrence managed to do. And Lawrence was guilty of a lot worse than Nick. He was basically the architect of Gilead, let's not forget. And he even managed to redeem himself. Nick was disgusted by Gilead's abuse of women and never engaged in it personally. He never believed in the religious cult, and he was happy to be part of the reform efforts in New Bethlehem, which were at least an improvement on the rest of Gilead. Nick performed many heroic and life-threatening acts to save June, like when he arranged for Mayday to try to get her to Canada at the start of Season 2, then bringing her supplies and advice while she was holed up in an abandoned factory on the run. He did his best to arrange for Mayday-affiliated people to try to help her get out of Gilead then, but eventually she got caught. Then at the end of Season 2, once again, Nick tried to help June escape along with their baby by essentially keeping Fred Waterford at gunpoint all night while Mayday was working on the escape plan. He figured out a way to cover himself, of course, and a justification for holding Fred at gunpoint by saying he was protecting him from dangerous activities going on outside. But still, this was really stepping up for June. He was frustrated by the fact that she ultimately chose to stay and fight for Hannah, but she did get her baby out, thanks in part to Nick. Nick comforted June when she had no one else to turn to, and because of him, she experienced at least a modicum of love, support, and even a little joy in the midst of so much suffering. But he only took risks for her, to save her or do favors for her, just because he loved her. So you could say that this was actually a selfish thing. He was only focused on this one woman he loves, and not all of the other enslaved women and children. Even when he helped others like Luke and Moira this season when they were stranded in no man's land, Nick only agreed to help because June showed up to beg him in person. And sure, Nick provided intel on Gilead to Canada by the end of Season 5, but that was only because June had been targeted for assassination by Gilead supporters, and he demanded that Tuello keep her safe in return. Also part of the deal was that Nick got to go see June in the hospital in Canada. Until she was hit by a car driven by a Gilead supporter, Nick had rejected Tuello's prior offers to strike a deal and provide intel. Unfortunately, in Season 6, Nick grew much more selfish. For instance, when he was suffering from a guilty conscience over killing a young guardian, he had asked June to spend the night with him, which was a huge risk for her. She should have gone immediately back to Canada with Moira and Lawrence. He just wanted her to be there as comfort for himself, not because it was the safer thing to do. This put her in serious danger, and she wound up having to put her trust and her life in Serena's hands that night as a result. And then, when Nick was afraid for his life, he gave up June's Mayday plan to Wharton to save himself. In an interesting scene during Episode 9, June is imprisoned and awaiting execution when Commander Wharton visits her, and after they have a conversation, she suddenly grabs his arm and implores him to be the man Serena believes he can be, to choose love. But of course her plea falls on deaf ears. June, of all people, should know that argument wouldn't work on Wharton, but she was really thinking about Nick when she said this. She desperately wants Nick to be the man she believed he was, and choose love, to choose her and not Gilead. Serena and June wound up having this in common. Just as Serena had been blind about Wharton, June had been blind about Nick. Serena believed Wharton could be a good man and help her change Gilead, but she was sorely mistaken, blinded by her love for him. And June, blinded by love as well, believed Nick would always be her hero. It's ironic because on the very night when Nick was betraying June, giving up her Mayday plan to Wharton, unbeknownst to her at the time, June was calling Serena out on her feelings for Wharton. Serena claimed Wharton is not like the others, but June called her on it and said that she's still subjugating herself to a powerful man and working for Gilead. Still, June was doing something similar, idealizing Nick as a good man who was different from the other commanders, believing he wouldn't let her down. Both June and Serena had to learn the hard way that good man and commander in Gilead are mutually exclusive terms. In episode 8, when Serena discovered a handmaid in their new home, her eyes finally opened, and she realized that Wharton was just like the rest of the commanders. He claimed to be a good man, and Serena said, "You can't be. You're a commander." And that is the hard truth that both Serena and June had to face. There is no such thing as a good commander in a dystopian society that enslaves women. Full stop. This place is rotten to the core. It's like saying that some American slave owners were okay because they were kind to their slaves. No, absolutely not. They were still part of an inexcusable system of oppression and human rights violations. So, in Gilead, every commander is complicit in this vile place's abuse, and Nick has been rising through the ranks more each season, his complicity growing even more insidious and inexcusable. So unless Nick decided to walk away from Gilead and join the revolution, or at least continue providing the resistance with intel from within, no matter what, even if he hadn't been on this particular plane, eventually Nick needed to be taken down with the other commanders, and June needed to let him die. And I'll get into this scene more in my next deep dive, but I have to point this out. Who was the one who was there for June to save her when she was about to be executed in this episode? Who was it? Was it Nick? No. In the end, it was Luke. Of course it was Luke. Luke is the one who loves her enough to put his life on the line in this dangerous of a situation, participating in a violent skirmish with Mayday at the gallows. Nick has never done anything close to this. He's only ever saved June or helped June in covert ways while protecting himself at the same time. And as June's eyes open to see Luke there, taking an enormous risk to free her, despite his knowledge of her love for Nick, I think she's experiencing an awakening in more ways than one. She finally sees that Luke is the one who has been worthy of her love all along. Luke, not Nick. And Luke is the one who is linking arms with her and marching into this revolution against Gilead to finally begin tearing down this vile system. And it's going to take time. It's going to take a long time, make no mistake. We're not going to see the fall of Gilead in the span of one finale. As June said to Commander Wharton in this episode, episode 9, this is the beginning of the end. So I'm really excited to see more of the beginning of the end of Gilead in that finale coming up. And I have a whole lot more of the penultimate episode, Execution, to break down for you guys. And I'll be doing that in the coming days. So stay tuned for that next deep dive. And let me know what you think about the end of Nick. What are you feeling about it? Do you understand why Nick had to go? Or do you still think that the show did him dirty? I understand why there are a lot of Nick fans, and the way Nick was characterized in this show, it was easy to root for him. It was easy to root for him because he was June's hero so many times, and he did many good things. He wasn't an evil man at heart, of course. I'm not damning Nick to the core, but unfortunately, in the end, because he didn't step up, because he didn't join the revolution and redeem himself, he just had to go. It's as simple as that, in my opinion. But let me know what you guys think down in the comment section. And if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe. And until next time, keep on deep diving, and let's see what we can uncover together.